Hey, Matt, welcome back. For all you who've seen Matt before, he is my producer, my good friend, and he's also runs a podcast, a business focused podcast called the UX Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Has a lot of great guests there, so make sure you join Matt.
That's right. So we were talking the last episode about culture, and that led to the conversation about ownership, because every company wants executives that take ownership. But I wanted to go a little bit deeper and pick your brain a bit on what that actually looks like and what companies expect, and just from the perspective of the candidates that you're placing into companies these days. If you could install kind of an ownership mentality into them, or amp up the ownership mentality that hopefully is already there. I want to talk about, maybe 2 or 3 keys of what that ownership looks like and how it looks in everyday life. So I don't know if you have any concrete examples that you can give, but I want to talk a little bit about maybe the mentality first. Just what does it mean for someone, executive especially, to kind of take real ownership of their responsibility, their role?
I think real ownership of the role is, look, they internally, they just take it internally and they say, okay, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this. The overall results that me or my team bring to the company will be mine.
Right.
If we do great, it will be a result of the fact that I built a great team. I let my great team do the things that they needed to do to be successful, and we kicked it. We will kick it.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, it is, if we miss, it will fall on me. I will take the responsibility. And we will do a deep dive on where I failed to do that caused lack of results or less results. Did I not hire the right person for this role?
Mm-hmm.
Should I have, moved some people around to better focus on their strengths? And I think, that's what extreme ownership of is realizing that your actions, if you're standing up and saying, I am the captain of this department, I am the captain of this division, I am the captain of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I may be an individual contributor, but I am the captain of myself. I will take responsibility and not blame others for a lack of results, and I will pat myself on the back when I deliver the results.
Mm-hmm.
That's ownership to me.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I've picked up along the way about ownership that really helped me and changed my perspective on it. The first thing is that the last time I was in, the closest thing to the corporate world was I was in a multi-million-dollar marketing agency and working directly for the CEO. And the way that he put it, and he didn't call it ownership, but what he was looking for out of his, let's say, 3 key people that he surrounded himself with, and I was one of those people, was he explained it to me that he's like, look, I want you, like when I give you something, I want you to take the mental burden off of me of thinking about that again outside of just when we meet every week or every 2 weeks to talk about that thing. Outside of that meeting, I shouldn't be thinking about your thing at all because you're thinking about it. And that's interesting because I don't think most people think of it in terms of I'm doing X, Y, and Z and I have expectations, but they still, there's a little part of them that thinks, well, I'm not the person at the absolute top of the ladder. They're the one that actually has to be accountable for the results. And so they keep them, they do things, or they go about their role in such a way that, they're doing stuff, but they put the mental burden still on the person above them for the real final result. And I think if you think about it that way, and it helps to be in charge of something where you're delegating to other people and you start to see how this dynamic works in yourself, like your brain just gets full. Like you talked about the CEO that you met with last night, and he feels like he has 1,001 things on his plate. the executives that he surrounds himself with should be taking those things not off of his plate just in terms of what they're doing, but mentally and emotionally and like psychologically off of his plate.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right. I
ownership.
mean, I was there, we were talking, and I said, if I went back I'd be a wicked VP of sales. I mean, I would just be, it would be, and I go, the sales guys, I'm not sure they'd like me because,
right.
because I'd be saying, look, at the end of every week, I want to see who you called. I want your call sheets, or I want your, show me the 50 customers you reached out to this week and what were the results. I'm taking ownership, and look, if the person says, well, I'm a relationship salesperson, that's like the scariest word,
Great. How many
words in
phone
the world.
calls, meetings, appointments, and thank you
How
cards
many
does that translate
relationships?
into?
How many relationships did you build? Oh, well,
Right.
I just waited for the phone to ring. Well, we're not in the farming business; we're in the hunting business.
Right.
I think that's it. When you hire a chief commercial officer, a chief sales officer, revenue officer, or VP of sales, whatever people want to call them these days, that person is saying, "You go, hey, Mr. CEO, you go do your own thing. I got the sales piece, and on top of just the deals we bring in or the business we bring in, I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you a 15 rundown on how many customers we touched, how many." That's why Salesforce is making a fortune, because you can tap it right in, and it's not that hard to track. But we'll talk about our goal every week is to hit 50 new customers. How are we going to hit 50 new customers?
Like, part of why Salesforce is valuable is because it reveals that things that you thought were happening weren't actually happening, and it makes sure people make them happening.
Bingo.
Yeah,
Bingo.
that's hilarious.
And it's like it's a function of, hey, I got it now. For me to have ownership of it, it's a very candid conversation to say, look, here is what I need. I'm the VP of sales. I need I need some really good marketing that looks like this. It's going to cost $100,000 plus 40 for the person to implement it, whatever. I need 4 really good territory reps to go out and get it. That's going to cost XYZ. But on the flip side, if I have that, here's what I expect to be able to deliver in return. That's ownership. Ownership of personal lives is if you run up a lot of student debt, you've got you signed up for it, you went to college, it's on you. And the fact that you have $100,000 of student debt, which a lot of people do these days, it's for you to pay back and not expect somebody else to do it for you. I think that's what companies I think that's what people in general, are looking for, is the people that can take responsibility for their own actions and understand that that's the pathway to success.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Whining and blaming never got anybody anywhere.
Well, and you mentioned something, I think it was in the last episode that we were talking about, the past performance is a pretty good indicator of future performance. And I think when it comes down to things, like you mentioned, like there's indicators like how they, somebody handles something like a student debt, right? That, like, I never thought of it that way, although that's exactly how I would approach it, which is great. I made the decision. Now let's go out and let's make more money, and let's get it squared away. Let's get it taken care of. But that's one of those things where I don't know how many people would think to dig into someone's background and ask the questions in such a way that it reveals what kind of ownership mentality they've had in the past, if that makes sense.
I think it's good.
That's where it's really valuable to have somebody like you.
Yeah, I think it's a good line of questioning. And then, for companies that are doing interviews, it's tell me about your success. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your successes. If you're a BC student, why were you a BC student? If you're an A student, why are you an A student? And I think it's, listening to the answers, and when it comes to, when it comes to the university thing, it's a function of, hey, look, did you evaluate? Why did you go to the university you went to, knowing that it was very expensive? When there are other options, did you plan on taking on this much debt, or is it, I'm using the debt thing as too much, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a good line of questions, like, what are the successes you've had in your life, and is there
Mm-hmm.
a pattern of successes?
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you about the
Yeah.
college kid. I was telling you about the college kid the other day who said, "Hey, look, I want to make $100,000 by the time I was like 20,"
Mm-hmm.
and I did.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good success story. That's pretty good success.
Yeah. I know several guys that are multimillionaires today that's exactly how they got their start. They
Yeah,
started a lawn care business that turned into a
but
multi six-figure business. It's crazy. But yeah, like you mentioned that person is a thoroughbred. And that
yeah,
was a good way to put it, which I like that. Like that person wants to run. And
right,
if you're that type of person, then you got to find a company where you fit in at that wants those types of people. Like that, you want to be matched up with a company where they're looking for exactly that type of person, because they want somebody to take the mental burden. They want somebody to take ownership. They don't
right,
want to have to micromanage. Yeah, like that's why it's so important not to just get yourself right in your ownership mentality, but then find a culture that like values that highly.
right. Hey, look, everybody's got, why were you a BC student? Well, my mother had cancer while I
Mm-hmm.
was in college. Pick a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I had a tragedy in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I dealt with the tragedy in my life, you know, this way, but my grades suffered because of it. Here's what I learned.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. Did I wish I? Yeah. Did I just? Yeah. I took on a little too much. I had this chemistry class that I really just didn't understand, and you know, by the time I figured it out, I'd already bombed a couple tests and whatever else. Hey, look, it's. I think extreme ownership is really, or just ownership in general, is really understanding how, you know, not everybody's perfect. We all fall short. But you say,
Mm-hmm.
well, why? Why did I fall short?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when people are ready to admit that, their actions, no matter what they were, for good or for bad, played a role. They're growing as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to self-reflect in their growth. And I think that's what really makes good executives, and not just executives, but good people, is that they can reflect upon themselves and say, hey, yeah, I could have done that a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know Hey, look, 80%, if the minimums weren't good enough, they weren't. If the minimums weren't good enough, they wouldn't be the minimums. I did the minimums on this thing so I could focus somewhere over here.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's okay.
exactly. Yeah. And I think for ownership, when you think about, when you fall short, you mentioned that everybody falls short, uh, disconnecting your own ego and identity from the fact that you fell short is what I think gives you the freedom to say, I know I had a part in it somewhere.
Yep.
It probably wasn't 100%. There are probably plenty of other factors involved, but at some point, even if it's only 5%, I was responsible for it at some level. But that's okay. That doesn't
Right.
define me as a person. It doesn't make me incompetent. It doesn't make me bad. It doesn't make me anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people that I know that are the best at taking ownership and they're the best at analyzing and correcting failure are the people who are most disconnected in their ego and identity from those
Mm-hmm.
outcomes. Right? The outcomes are the outcomes. They are feedback. They are science. They are the results of a science experiment that I conducted. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get the result that I wanted? No. Great. Let's find another ingredient for the light bulb. Like that's
Right.
it. It's they approach it. They approach it differently than people that don't have the ownership mentality.
Yep. And look, when you fire an employee, when an employee is fired for anything other than malfeasance, theft, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
say they just weren't getting the job done, or they weren't. It's not just a failure on that employee's part. It's a failure on the employer's part, or the boss's part too, because either, they were put in a role that they weren't capable of handling. The person didn't realize that, they didn't pick up on a couple things in an interview that, you know, would tell them that the person wasn't going to succeed. There's a whole lot of things. Now, that may be little, that that issue, that part of it may be 10, 20%. But at the end of the day, it played a role. That
Mhm.
employee is no longer with the company because the boss played a role in it that, you know,
Mhm. Help determine the outcome.
yeah, helped it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yep, and that's yeah, it's a little hard to parse out. I mean, that's when you're looking at candidates, that's your job among many other things is to parse out and determine whether that person has an ownership mentality. What were the results that they've gotten up to that point? What did
yeah.
they learn? And trying to figure out, okay, well, number one, did you get the results that you were hired to get? And if not,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to be the one that steps in and says, all right, tell me the story. Like, let's,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to like help sort it out and determine whether you think it was the executive who would thrive in a different role or a different company,
Mm-hmm.
or whether it was their, just their own gets it once it capacity, like just the poor fit for that particular role. So yeah, that's where I think someone like yourself, it ends up being really valuable. And it's an interesting role to have to dive into that with somebody.
Yeah, no, I think I'm a firm believer in, the money manager who gets results year after year after year. Look, not every year is going to be an up year, but in general,
Hmm.
you know, he does a little better than the market in the up years. He does a little less, worse than the market in down years, but he's got a pretty good track record. That's probably the person that I'll invest with versus a guy who's lost investors' money three times
Hmm.
in a row. You know,
Yeah. Even if there's a big
and
win in
and,
there
and then you,
somewhere. Yeah.
and then you say, well, what made you think it was going to be different this time?
Yeah.
I think that I think that's a good um, way to evaluate how a
Hmm.
person, are they, you know, motivated to take everything to the next level
Hmm.
in their personal lives
Yep.
and willing to admit that's ownership.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. To me, all business development is personal development. So
yeah,
yeah, if I was, if I'm in communication with an executive and I'm responsible for matching them up with a role, that's one of the first things I'm going to want to know is what are they doing for personal development? Because if they're not extremely driven in that, then that has all kinds of ramifications that shows up in their professional life, in their career.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep,
Love it.
absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, I know you got to run. You've got an event to attend. So how can people reach out and connect?
Craig at northstaresg.com is email. Phone number is 910-509-7129. And website is northstaresg.com. All my podcasts and all my blogs are up there. So click on it and say hi.
That's right. And that goes whether you are looking to fill a role in your company. So if you're on the board or you're a CEO and you want to find C-level executive, or if you're a candidate for one of those types of positions. So either
Yep.
or that, like you're working with both
Yep.
sides. You need the right people on both sides to pair
Yep.
them up.
Always looking for the right people who want to take
Yep.
your career to the next level.
Yep. Awesome. Craig, appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Matt.